So Kilkenny see off Galway by 220 to 24 points and regained the Leinster title that they last won in 2016. And obviously it was getting to the stage where Kilkenny were, for a team that had been so used to winning silverware, what it was Leinster. I mean, they've won a couple of leagues in the last few years in All Irelands. It had been a few years at this point. So I think from their point of view, to go another 4 years without winning a Leinster title, having only done that 2 times previously in their history, was a massive one. I think TJ Reid was really, really quiet for most of the game, but later on he got a goal. But even Richie Hogan, a guy who was hurler of the year just 6 years ago, he came on and he scored a goal. Then he set up a point for Liam Blanchfield. Then he also set up a scoring chance for Martin Keown, who should have nailed that into the corner of the net when he went through, but obviously missed that chance. But it was basically about Kilkenny. They found a way to make sure that they capitalised on the chances they had, because over the course of the game, I think the forwards were starved at times. There wasn't enough ball going up, or if it did, there probably wasn't enough conversion rate from the forward line. If you look at the overall stats of the game that I've done here, it's 44 scoring chances were created from Galway over the course of the game, and they just nailed 24, which obviously isn't good enough at all. Whereas Kilkenny, they created 30. I mean, 40 compared to 30, you really should be winning any game where you're creating that many chances compared to the opposition. And it was just 24 created, 24 of 44 for Galway, 22 of 30 for Kilkenny. And one of the stats that I was doing throughout the game was that after 53 minutes, the Kilkenny forwards had scored just 1-3 from play. And then down the stretch, if I just look at it here, from 54 minutes on, Blanchfield got a point, then Richie Hogan got a goal, then TJ Reid got a goal, then he got a point as well. Richie Hogan, he scored a point when there was probably an open goal there as well, and he might have knocked that into the net. Then Conor Brown got his second point, Martin Keown and Richie Hogan again. So the forwards just started to completely take control towards the latter part of the game. And from a point where Davy Burke had come on and scored 2 points for Galway, and you were thinking, okay, well, that's going to be the sort of impact in this game that's going to be telling. From that point on, it was 23 points to 215, 2 points ahead to Galway with 8 minutes to go, and they scored just a point more, whereas Kilkenny, they scored 5 points more. So they really kind of beat them down the stretch. And for long stages, you wondered, will Kilkenny see this game out? Because their full back line looked in bother. You had Conor Delaney giving away a couple of frees, Hugh Lawler giving away frees, got beaten by Jason Flynn at one point, who should have probably buried the ball into the net at one stage. I mentioned Conor Delaney there. One of the key things that he did was, in the first half, after 7 minutes, Conor Whelan had him one-on-one, and you're thinking, Conor Whelan, nobody can really stop him here. I mean, Michael Rice in the preview talked about what was he concerned about coming into the game, and he said Conor Whelan 1v1 versus anybody. But he ran at Conor Delaney, and he ended up only having to settle for a point because Delaney was sending backwards, which was key. I think Galway really were quite poor in their use of the ball. I mean, I've talked about 44 chances and only scoring 24 of them. That's a really low return rate. They were I think some of their wides and some of their use of the ball and some of the way they turned good possession into 50-50 was fairly criminal. One really bright spot of the game was that Joe Canning sideline to Joe Cooney, who came running up from the half back line and knocked it over the bar. I mean, what a beautiful score that was. Another key moment I thought was Tommy Walsh getting a block on Brian Kincannon. That was after about 32 minutes, and it was just like it kind of set the tone that Kilkenny were getting in those blocks, and the fact that Kilkenny did it without Colin Fennelly on the field towards the latter end of the field, he was taken off. Wally Walsh was taken off. Owen Cody had been really, really good in the first half. He'd won several frees. He ended up getting taken off. So Brian Cody had to rejig the team a number of times, and ultimately he got the sort of the blend that worked towards the end. I mean, TJ Reid was held for, let's see, his first score was after 58 minutes from play, that is. I mean, Kilkenny were knocking over free after free in the first half, and that was what they were basically subsisting on. As I said, 3 points from play from that forward line in the first 53 minutes. But they see it through, and crucially, that puts Kilkenny through to an All-Ireland semi-final rather than having to go through a quarter-final against, who knows, Tipperary or maybe Clare. You could end up with a fairly terrible tie in the quarter-final, and that's what Galway now face. And it looked all good for Galway after that Wexford performance, but in light of how Wexford played against Clare, they were dreadful. It kind of puts that into context. But You have to ask, did Kilkenny ride their luck or did they see it out? I think you'd have to say they saw it out, but just going from the start of the second half, they drew it at 13 points each when TJ knocked over a free after 36 minutes. But between there and the 54th minute, they only scored 1 point, and that was from Connor Brown, who was playing in wing back. They were not creating that many chances. Just 14 chances created in the second half. I wouldn't say they rode their luck per se, because what Richie Hogan did when he came in was just pure class. And the fact that he had come on against Dublin and missed 2 points from basically it was like 3 chances in front of goal, and he knocked them wide. I was half thinking, could this be the last dance that he has with Brian Cody? Might that be the end of him? And especially the way the All Ireland finished for him last year, getting that red card, you think it's going to be hard to come back from that. But to be fair to him, he's come in here, he's turned this game, and the way he kind of flicked the ball up and knocked it into net for that goal was absolute majesty. So you'd have to commend Richie Hogan and even TJ Reid for staying in the game and making that huge contribution late on with 1-1. And a lot of the unheralded players, the likes of Martin Keown, who probably wouldn't be the silkiest of hurlers, he was working really hard throughout the game, got himself a couple of points. Connor Brown kept going, made a few mistakes, got a few scores. Even the full back line, as I said, Conor Delaney and Hugh Lawler, for example, and even Tommy Walsh, they made a few mistakes. But ultimately, they saw it through, they were dogged, and that's what the Kilkenny hurling team is. They're going to keep going. And as I said in the preview, there was a couple of times where they've capitulated in the last few years in second halves, whether that's against Tipperary, obviously hanging on against Limerick last year, a couple of years ago against Waterford, in that game down in Thurles in extra time, fell away. Also the All Ireland in 2016. But they really stood up here against a Galway team that you really looked like they were back to themselves. Last year knocked out in the Leinster round robin. Thought they were back to themselves this year. They've been All Ireland challengers or thereabouts for a number of years. So you'd have to commend Kilkenny hugely on this performance. Very encouraging, and they'll definitely feel like there's an All Ireland in them now.